The sponsor for today's video is Walt's Comic Shop. Make sure to stay tuned at the end of the video to find out more. A good whodunit murder mystery has been the hot commodity of pop culture for centuries now. Its continuing relevance stretches through all types of media, from Sherlock Holmes in all his iterations to uncovering whether Professor Plum did it in the library with a wrench. Even more recently, Rian Johnson's Knives Out trilogy has charmed the public with a new quirky detective to add to our sleutheum. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't love sinking their teeth into a good mystery. How could you not love it? There's no better feeling than solving a puzzle that someone else has laid out for you. It makes you feel like you are the smartest person in the room when you put two and two together. Especially if it's before the ingenious detective in the novel that you're reading who hasn't yet cracked the code. Even if you can't figure out where the story is taking you, it's still a relief knowing that the facts will come to light and justice will be served in the end. Much like the romance genre, we find comfort in knowing the outcome of genre stories, even if we don't know the particulars of the journey that it takes us on. How we come to know whodunit is thrilling, but we also know that if a detective finds a dead body and some clues, the culprit will be caught. It's why the mystery genre has found such a hardcore fan base. When we can't find logic or reason in our everyday lives, we can be sure to find it in the fiction we consume, through the means of Poirot, Queen, or Dupin. When it comes to mystery novels, though, you might assume that this is a uniquely Anglophone fictional genre. After all, the detectives I just listed now are all of European or American descent, with authors of the same origin. However, mysteries are beloved all over the world, with each country having their own take on this type of fiction. Nowhere is the love for this genre more apparent than in Japan, though, with the golden age of detective novels still continuing to this day, and English speakers only just now getting these modern masterpieces translated. The recent success of the manga series Don't Call It Mystery by legendary shoujo mangaka Yumi Tamura is clear evidence of Japan's love for this genre. It's an ongoing josei drama mystery series that began running in the magazine Flowers back in 2017. What originally started as a one-shot has now become one of the most highly successful manga series in recent years. It has sold millions of copies, won several awards, and even spawned a successful TV show of its own with a movie coming soon. It would be remiss to not call Don't Call It Mystery a cultural staple at this moment. In the manga, we follow a college student, Kuno Totino. His peculiar name, fluffy hair, love for curry, and penchant for waxing philosophical has deemed him a bit of an oddity. One day, the police show up at his door and tell him that a classmate of his has been murdered in the park nearby, and Totino is suspect number one. When he gets taken in for questioning, Totino must use his sharp tongue and quick wit to get himself out of being wrongfully convicted, thus starting his series of unfortunate events that occur throughout the entire manga. The premise for this series seems like a pretty by-the-book mystery setup filled with gruesome murders and psycho killers every chapter. But there's just one little thing you may be wondering. If it's a mystery manga, why not call it mystery? What is it about this series that would make Yumi Tamura clarify that it's not even in this genre? Even going as far as saying that she doesn't have it in her to even write one. If it looks like a mystery, walks like a mystery, and quacks like a mystery, I may just call it mystery. One reason for this could be that Totino is generally just begrudgingly involved with these criminal activities. He's not a detective or an investigator, a PI, or a criminal profiler. He's just an ordinary student who has a natural curiosity for people that unfortunately pulls him into increasingly scary scenarios. This is much unlike the detective in a regular mystery novel who takes on a job for money or for the thrill. But even if Totino doesn't want to be involved involved in these mysteries that wouldn't make the manga itself not a mystery, or make Yumi Tamura say that she can't write one. No, the real reason that you should not call it mystery is because the series itself is not invested in the whodunit either. Solving the crime is just a not-so-fun side quest for Totino before he gets to go back to making curry and attending classes. Tamura does not seriously engage with fair play crime writing mechanics that would allow the reader to follow along with the clues given like it would in a typical mystery. Rather, she wants us to ponder any and all philosophical questions that may arise from the crime at hand along with Totino. Something that's a bit against the rules of detective mystery fiction. While the golden age of detective novels was happening for English speakers in the 1920s and 30s, interest in the genre was only just starting in Japan at the time. It was becoming increasingly common in the late 1800s to be influenced by Western practices, and through translated stories, they found inspiration in the Western mystery novel. One of the biggest authors to start this wave of Japanese detective fiction was Edogawa Ranpo. He was heavily inspired by English detective works of the era, which can be seen in his pen name, which sounds a lot like Edgar Allan Poe. In 1923, Edogawa created his own detective mystery novel called The 2-Sen Copper Coin, which mixed the logical Western fiction with the more Japanese setting. The novel found great success and allowed Edogawa to continue creating his own mystery fiction. He even got to make a gentleman detective of his own called Kagoro Akechi, who might sound familiar to those of you who played Persona 5. Edogawa was quite obsessed with the idea of making proper Western detective novels, but as he continued throughout his career, he ended up straying off the beaten path more, leading many to criticize his works for being too gory or erotic, as he started adding more horror into the mystery novels since these were his more popular series. There was much debate around what constituted as a good use of the mystery detective novel already, but it heightened even more as Japanese authors began creating their own stories. This school of thought in Japan is known as Honkaku, which directly translates to either orthodox or authentic. Honkaku mystery novels were ones that strictly followed the tradition of S.S. Van Dyne's 20 rules for writing detective fiction. Rules like, all clues must be plainly stated and described, or the culprit must turn out to be a person who has played more or less of a prominent part in the story. Many Japanese authors at the time, like Saishi Yokomizo, who created the iconic Kindaichi Kosuke, followed these principles. Essentially, Honkaku mysteries were solvable puzzles that would have the answer in the back of the book. They value intellectualism and game mechanics above all. Something like a locked room mystery that makes you use rational thinking to solve impossible murders like their Rubik's Cubes. This was considered the ideal of detective fiction amongst purist mystery readers, and what made it become more mainstream from then on. Novels like Decagon House Murders, written in 1987, would reference back to famous authors like Agatha Christie, Ellery Queen, or Dorothy L. Sayers. All the names of the characters were nicknamed by these authors' last names, and they all belonged to a mystery club of their own as well. Not only was this to show the author's knowledge of the genre, but also to pay homage to their roots. They would also throw in their own opinions on the mystery genre at times through their characters, which often would reiterate their purist ideals. What mystery novels need are a great detective, a mansion, its shady residents, bloody murders, impossible crimes, and never-before-seen tricks played by the murderer. Honkaku has diverged quite a few ways since the 40s when it began, but the continuing love Japan has for the mystery genre has kept the golden age of detective mystery alive, especially in the form of manga, where mangaka are still being inspired by the literary greats. Manga series Detective Conan is obviously inspired by Sherlock Holmes with an homage to its author, and the Kandaichi case files keeps Kosuke Kandaichi alive. With all that being said, it's very clear that the idea of mystery in Japan is based around the traditional rules of writing that was established in the Anglophone heyday. Since Yumi Tamura, the author of Don't Call It Mystery, is such a big fan of mystery herself, it wouldn't be wrong to assume that she has established the same reasoning. She's been into this genre since at least the 90s and has cited authors like Ellery Queen, Agatha Christie, and Edogawa Ranpo as some of her favorites. Despite this though, she doesn't turn to these authors for inspiration in her own stories, rather looking towards real-life criminal cases and news articles for her character Totono to contemplate. She's not interested in the game mechanics or impossible nature of crimes. Tamura simply wants to convey her current musings on society, sexism, and everything in between through the medium of mystery, looking towards what society has deemed ordinary and turning that inside out. Genre rules will always be broken as a medium develops, as no genre never changes and always stays the same. However, even when looking at the 20 rules of detective writing by S.S. Van Dyne that many Japanese authors stuck to, Tamura hardly engages with them. In fact, throughout the first 2 volumes, never mind that Totono isn't a detective, nor does he want to be, she abides by less than half of the mystery writing rules that are so common in the first place. For example, Rule 15 is that the truth of the problem must be at all times apparent should the reader be shrewd enough. Put another way, if you are to go back and reread a novel, the clues should make it obvious to the reader who the culprit is. This is definitely not the case for Don't Call It Mystery. Within the first story of the omnibus, you would not be able to follow who the murderer is with the information we are given. It's not until the very end, where Totono connects the dots for us as the reader through his observations, that we are let in on the culprit of the crime of the week. Clues are often intentionally hidden from us, and when they aren't, could only be used to make a guess through a leap in logic. Quite the opposite of a mystery series that would want you to be just as informed as the detective. In the first chapter of the series, we are introduced to Totono, who is suspected of killing his college classmate and brought in for interrogation. Over the course of this 100-page plus opening to the manga, we are not given any clues in the traditional sense of physical evidence. Totono isn't analyzing fingerprints, scavenging newspapers, or gathering witnesses. He's stuck in a steel room being interrogated with only the cops telling him what they know and his own point of view. The information that we need to follow Totono's logic is not clearly stated to us, which completely breaks that first rule of detective writing. Instead of cleverly unraveling who the murderer is, we spend time in this locked room getting to know the police detectives that are questioning Totono. We learn about their daily lives outside of the office, their families, and personalities. As the readers, we are being constantly sidetracked by the mundanity of these people's interior thoughts, rather than trying to find clues to prove Totono's innocence. He has a conversation with a detective named Ikemoto about how the household work on women is actually much more than a husband could imagine. That taking out the trash requires more than just walking out to the garbage disposal, since you need to sort, drain, replace, and so on. Through this, having our own perceptions of the easiness of household work being altered. He also has an aside with the only woman in the office named Furumitsu, pondering about how it would be nice to have a third species that could live along with humans and be our watchdogs, keeping us from forming pack mentalities that would lead us down the wrong path. These continual asides are themselves breaking a rule of detective writing. Rule number 16, which states, a detective novel should contain no long descriptive passages, no literary dallies with side issues. It breaks this rule even further because it states that mystery novels should have a problem, analyze it, and bring it to a successful conclusion. To which Totono and Tamura by proxy aren't giving us factual analysis on the problems about society that they're bringing up. They merely bring the issue to light to let us as a reader form our own conclusions after analysis. There's no neat little bow that can tie off Totono's guidance, as the human psyche doesn't have one solution. One pivotal moment in the first chapter solidifies this as the thesis of the manga, and the reason why it bends the mystery genre so much. In a conversation he has with a lead detective named Aoto, Totono brings up a former case of Aoto's where he had wrongfully convicted someone. Aoto agrees that his detective work at that time was lackluster, but he knows he got the culprit right, as there can only be one truth. This statement astonishes Totono with how detrimental this viewpoint can be, and in turn poses a scenario. Person A and Person B bump into each other on the stairs, causing Person B to fall and injure themselves. Person B claims that A has always bullied them, and that they intentionally pushed them down. However, Person A claims they've always thought they were messing around and had no idea that's how B thought of them. It's not that one person is lying and the other person is telling the truth, but that everyone has their own perspectives in which they see their life. Even when you bring in a third person, they too will have a different perspective on this situation. Meaning, there's as many people in this world as the truths that they carry. There would be no conclusion to everyone's own truth in a mystery novel, though, leading Totono to posit once more. While there are many truths, there is only one reality. The reality in the scenario that was given is that Person B got hurt, and that is where the concern should lie, not with who's telling the truth and who isn't. Person B needs to receive support for the injury that they sustained, rather than being concerned about the intent. This reality is what should be important to the detectives and justice officials. Meanwhile, Totono can be concerned with the truths that each person shares. This is why the series is able to focus more on the emotional rather than the logical. With Totono as our main lead, who is not a detective, he can be more easily ready to hear out different perspectives and truths without having to be concerned about finding the reality or a conclusion. There is no one truth that closes these cases. This allows us to subtly analyze each character that we come across and dive deep into their psyches, slowly uncovering their flaws during the high stakes of murder cases and criminal involvement. Totono helps them grapple with these weaknesses by giving his own opinions that may never have crossed their mind previously, giving his own truth along with theirs. The conclusion to the story on who killed Totono's classmate ends with us finding out that one of the cops named Yabu was the culprit. He had tried to frame Totono as he was able to get a hold of one of his keys, and he planted evidence in his apartment. His reasoning for this was to avenge his wife and child, because the classmate has supposedly killed them in a hit and run. But the chapter does not end with this revelation, or Yabu's reasoning. His truth is only one of many. Totono's truth, in the third-party perspective, is that Yabu's revenge was only for self-satisfaction. That if he was such a workaholic that he could never get away to see his family, but he could so easily throw away his job to go kill someone, then his family must have meant so little to him. This may not be Yabu's truth. He may never have seen it this way at all. However, Totono can tell from his own experiences in life that Yabu's fragile masculinity as a provider meant more to him than being a presence in his family's life. The reality to the death of Yabu's family was never as important to him as his own truth, ultimately leading to the classmate's death, who could have given Yabu another perspective. Maybe he never drove the car in the first place. Maybe he was never involved in the hit and run, since Totono had overheard him saying he hardly ever got to drive the car anyway. The case doesn't end neatly. In fact, the case will never truly end for each of these characters because it has deeply impacted them in different ways. Totono has had to miss 5 days of classes to be interrogated. Yabu is now dealing with murder charges. Aoto feels the need to look back into his old case, and now they also have to figure out who was the original driver in that hit and run. In any other mystery novel, the criminal would be unmasked and their notorious deeds would be punished as everyone else celebrated. Not in Don't Call It Mystery though. Here, the criminals are just as human as the good guys and allows us to view them in more than just black and white. This series is really a psychological drama that uses the mystery genre to further explore the human psyche. In everyday life, you wouldn't often have to confront the more sinister parts of yourself that lurk in the corner. In a mystery, you can. Some of the most complex and hard to broach topics are going to arise when people are under distress or having to face the dark pits of humanity. But Totino guides us, and the other characters along with him, delving straight into that pit with inquisitiveness, rather than repulsion or fear, even if he himself does not want to be in these situations. In classic Yumi Tamura fashion, it's quite genius to mix the genre of detective mystery with wordy monologues that ask questions about life. By using the suspense of these against his will situations that Totino is in, with the natural air of curiosity for whodunit, we get sucked into his ruminations, hanging on to each one of his words as Totino answers questions like, why is it wrong to kill, with his own opinions. Not only making us wonder how Totino will uncover the reality of the crimes, but also making us wonder how he will broaden our perspectives while doing so. Don't Call It Mystery may not be a purist version of a mystery, but the workings of one are there. This manga would not work as well if it didn't have the crimes in the peripherals of the reader at all times. There is clearly a great love for the mystery genre embedded into this series, and it even plays into the fact that Totino would be a great detective if he actually wanted to be one. This love shines through, but it's the psychological aspects that make you leave that first volume with a million new questions bouncing around your head. So whether you want to call it a psychological study, a human drama, or a stage play in the form of a manga, whatever you do, just don't call it mystery. And now for today's sponsor. Are you looking for English language manga in the EU? Then you've found your place with Walt's Comic Shop. They have thousands of manga currently in stock with an inventory that's growing daily. Walt offers low shipping prices for any EU country with bulletproof packaging and speedy customer support. Currently, Waltz is offering special low-priced manga pre-orders called Manga Deals, and this month includes the new Vampire Knight box set for 35% off. If that might tickle your fancy, you can enter the code Colleen's MangaRx at checkout for free shipping on your first order of 40 euros. You can get all the shoujo and josei manga you need at waltzcomicshop.com.